Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi isanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Back at it again here with tafsir. This is Fath Rahmani fi Tafsir al-Quran by Mujiruddin al-Ulaymi rahimahullah ta'ala. We have of course been looking at his tafsir for quite some time now. Various different selections, and the latest project has been tackling Juz Amma, and we're currently looking at Surat al-Balad, which inshallah ta'ala we're going to complete this evening. So to jump right into this chapter, Surat al-Balad, Mujiruddin rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that this is a Meccan chapter according to the majority, while some hold the view that it was revealed in Medina. It has 20 verses, 336 letters, and 82 words. We begin, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La uqsimu bihadha al-balad. Opening with the first verse of the chapter, essentially saying what means, I swear by this city. If you follow the Arabic language, you'll note that the first word is la, and then uqsimu, which is I swear by. So there's a la here, which typically would mean no. So this is a device used in the Arabic language. You'll find it in the Quran in several verses. It's an emphatic particle of speech. It basically means, indeed, I swear by this city. And the city that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to is Mecca. This was the view of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. He said, when Allah says, La uqsimu bihadha al-balad, it means Mecca. Another thing to point out about this la at the beginning of the verse, when a surah begins with the la, or no, or one might translate it as nay, I swear by this city, and then it's followed by an oath. So here you see uqsimu. It's an oath that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking or making. This no here is revealed in refutation to false assumptions of the opposition, the opponents, the kuffar. So basically what it means is that Allah is saying, no, what you, the disbelievers, are saying or thinking is not correct, but the truth is what we are swearing by. No, what you're saying is incorrect, but the truth is what we're swearing by. And then there's a qasam, and then there'll be jawab al-qasam, which is going to basically be the end, or what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala getting at by way of the oath that He is taking or making. So that brings us to the next verse, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ, which basically means this city in which you live freely. Hillun bihadha al-balad. So the word here, or of course it being the one being addressed wa anta, is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And hil could mean a number of things. One of those is a person is going to reside in a place. If you've ever heard the phrase ahlan wa sahlan, which means, like people just translate it as welcome. But the longer phrase is halalta ahlan wa nazalta sahlan. Basically, like you've arrived as a resident, like ahl, like family. It's welcoming a person in as family. So here the halalta ahlan is you're coming to reside, or your arrival. So basically it could mean addressing the Prophet ﷺ, that you're going to reside in this city. And of course, if we understand the majority's view that this was revealed in Mecca, is an indication that the Prophet ﷺ would reside there. And we know that's where he was born, ﷺ. And that, of course, is a place he returned to open, which we're going to discuss a little bit here in this particular surah. Another thing to understand, perhaps more noted by Mujiruddin is that the وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ, the hil means to be free, unhindered, like halal. And we're talking here in the future, meaning that you will be unhindered in the future in this city. Meaning you'll be able to do whatever it is that you want or that you need to do. Having just finished Hajj, we discussed to some extent the rules pertaining to the haram, the sanctuary, what you can and cannot do. So you know when you enter into Mecca, you are hindered by certain rules and regulations. And one of those is killing. If you were to take a life in the haram, it would be sinful if it was warfare or anything else. It's a place that's a sanctuary and all of that stuff should be avoided. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating something about that here. وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ, you will be free or unhindered in this city in the future. You can do what you need to do, such as killing, without being sinful as others would be, whether that is in the past before or in the future, which is indicated in a hadith that's mentioned here shortly. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised the Prophet ﷺ that he would give victory to the Prophet ﷺ and conquer Mecca by his hand, meaning it would be done by the Prophet ﷺ. He would be the one to conquer Mecca. And so he made it lawful for him to enter into Mecca and to fight and to kill if required. And we note that that is exactly what he did, alayhi salatu wasalam. He went in and he granted amnesty to the vast majority of people that were there, the opponents. He did, however, order the killing of a handful or so. Ibn Khatal is one of them. And this was done while, Al-Ulaymi mentions, he was clinging to the curtains of the Kaaba. Also, Miqyas ibn Sababa. It's another one that was killed during that conquest. So these two individuals, why were they killed? To understand what the Prophet ﷺ did. So Ibn Ishaq, he states that Abdullah ibn al-Khattab, this was the first that was mentioned by Al-Ulaymi, he said he was a man from the tribe of Banu Taym ibn Ghalib. And orders were given to kill him. And this, of course, was on Yawm al-Fath. He was a Muslim and was sent by the Prophet ﷺ initially to collect the zakat. And with him was one of the Ansar, and there was also a Muslim servant that was there to help what would be a three-man team. It's noted that they stopped somewhere to camp, and Abdullah ibn Khattal instructed the servant to slaughter a goat and to prepare the food. And then he went to sleep. When he woke up, he found that the servant had not prepared the food. For some reason, he was enraged by that, attacked the man, and ended up killing him. And because he was afraid to return to the Prophet ﷺ, having killed a Muslim servant, he apostated and went back to idolatry. So the man was guilty of murder along with apostasy. So he murdered someone first, and then he apostated next. So the apostasy was an additional offense to the murder that he committed. He was noted to be a highway robber, a thief, someone who had behaved in an untrustworthy manner with the public funds, which was zakat al-mal. And then, after having apostated, he went to war against the Prophet ﷺ, inciting others to fight against him. This is what a number of historians mention. Others, they said that he embraced Islam and then migrated to Medina. That's when he was appointed to be the zakat collector. And that's when he was sent out. He attacked the man who was with him, killed him, flew into a rage, having not been obeyed by the servant there, beating the man to death. And then he said that the Prophet ﷺ would kill him for what he had done. And that's why the historians note that he apostatized and he fled away. And when he fled, he took the zakat money that he collected with him. That's where Ibn Ishaq mentions he misused the public funds. He went back to Mecca, and then he began to rejoin the polytheists, saying, I've not found a religion better than yours, after having left Islam. And so this is what led to his sentencing, being sentenced to death, because that's essentially what it was. The Prophet ﷺ conquered the city and was now acting as the ruler of the authority. He was the judge, and so he sentenced the man to death. He had taken a life wrongfully, and then on top of that, he apostated, and then on top of that, he misused the public funds, etc. The next person that was mentioned here that the Prophet ﷺ ordered to kill, by the way, he was killed while he was clinging to the curtains of the Kaaba. Right, they're in Mecca now. They come back to Mecca, and Ibn Khatal, he's there. He goes to the Kaaba and he holds on to the curtains, covering himself in the curtains, thinking that because he's holding on to the most honorable thing, the sacred of sacreds, he's holding on to it, that would perhaps save his and spare his life. Like, you can't kill me while I'm holding on to these curtains. But that's what the Prophet ﷺ, he said, kill him even if he's clinging to the covering of the Kaaba. And that's exactly where they found him. And one of the companions fulfilled the command of the Prophet ﷺ. The next one, Miqyas ibn Subaba al-Laythi. The Prophet ﷺ also ordered that the man be killed. And that's because he also murdered a person. He murdered one of the Ansar. And this took place because the Ansari man accidentally killed his brother during one of the battles, Muraysir. The Ansari man mistook Miqyas's brother to be one of the enemies during battle. So it was like friendly fire. And so when the Prophet ﷺ was informed of this accidental death, he awarded Miqyas the blood money that was to be paid. And so this is when the man, he became Muslim, and he took the blood money for his brother, whose name was Hisham, for his accidental death, declaring himself a Muslim. And then shortly thereafter, he assaulted the Ansari man who killed his brother wrongfully and murdered him. And then after that, he left Islam. And he began to proclaim that proudly and boasting that he had said, it gratifies the soul to have spent the night in the trench, one's robes spattered with the blood of the treacherous, boasting about the crime that he had committed. And so the Prophet ﷺ gave the order to anyone who met up with him to put him to death. And so some say the reason that he was killed, it was much like the first, that he was guilty of murder. He had wrongfully taken a life, and so he was sentenced to death. Along with the fact that he split away from the community, the Muslim community, and then he joined the ranks of the enemies. So it's an act of treachery, it's an act of war. And so the sin of apostasy is just on top of all of that crime that he committed. And so there's an argument that says the Prophet ﷺ killed Miqyas ibn Subaba not due to his apostasy, but as retribution for the innocent man, the Ansari that he had murdered. So that gives you, then again, there's a hadith or two that indicate the Prophet ﷺ singling out a handful of people. One hadith in Sunan Naseeha says there were 4 men and 2 women that were to be sentenced to death. 2 of them mentioned by name here. In the hadith, you'd find the names of the other 2 men at the very least. But Al-Ulaymi doesn't mention any more than these 2, so we won't delve into it any further than that. So basically, as the Imam says, he made the blood of some lawful. Right? When he says, وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ, you're free, meaning unlimited, unrestricted in this land. He made the blood of some lawful, the Prophet ﷺ, by declaring them to be sentenced to death. He made their blood lawful in that sacred land. And then the blood of others was made unlawful. And that's when he said, whoever enters the house of Abu Sufyan is safe. That's what the Prophet ﷺ did when he entered into Mecca, conquering it. I guess you could say, Man dakhala dara Abi Sufyan fahuwa aminun. Basically, like, you go there into the territory, if you will, of Abu Sufyan. Basically, you're surrendering, peacefully surrendering. You go there and you're safe. You're not going to face any fight or any or possible death. Then he said, in a hadith, indeed Allah made Mecca sacred the day He created the heavens and the earth, and it will not be lawful for anyone before me, nor will it be lawful for anyone after me. It was made lawful for me for a short period of the day. It is sacred with sanctity of Allah until the day of resurrection. And there's another hadith which reads, so if anyone tries to use the fighting of the Prophet ﷺ during Fath Mecca as an evidence or an excuse to fight there, right? So someone might say, right, someone might, for example, say, well, it's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. If you're in war times to fight and to go to battle in Mecca, because the Prophet ﷺ did. There's a hadith for it, as a matter of fact. There's more than one hadith, and we're people of sunnah. We follow the sunnah. Not understanding if they don't understand all of the sunnah in its entirety, the entire corpus of the hadith literature, along with the supporting understanding from the fuqaha, etc., a person might come and use this as an excuse. The Prophet ﷺ went ahead and sealed the deal on that. If anyone uses the fighting of the Prophet ﷺ as an excuse, then tell him that Allah permitted it for His messenger and He has not permitted it for you. That's the message that would be sent in that case. And then, of course, there are various other rulings that have to do with the haram, such as entering into Mecca without ihram. And Mujiruddin, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentions the various opinions regards to that in Surah al-Baqarah, which we may look at another time. The next verse, it reads, وَوَالِدٍ وَمَا وَلَدٍ. There are numerous ways that you could translate this. وَوَالِدٍ وَمَا وَلَدٍ. So, wow here, that's and, or one might say, I swear by the begetter. Al-walid is like the father, the one that births something, and walad is the begotten. So I swear by the begetter and the begotten. And so when he says, I swear by the begetter and the begetter here is referring to Adam alayhi salam, the first of man. And the walad is referring to his offspring. That's all of Adam's descendants. Some have said that al-walid here, the father, is Ibrahim. Wal-walad, and the son is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And it should come to no surprise that Ibrahim is the father of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Through various generations, obviously, but the bloodline of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is such that it returns back to Ismail, as opposed to Ishaq, which was the bloodline of the other prophets and messengers afterward. And then, of course, Ismail, the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So that was the single prophet that went through that particular bloodline. However, they all referred or went back to Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, known as Abul Anbiya, the father of the prophets. So here, it's either this or that. The way that, if you note here, in Mujiruddin, he says, it refers to Adam alayhi salam, wa dhurriyatuhu, and his offspring, waqil. When you're reading text like this, when they say waqila, which means it's said, al-walid Ibrahim, wal-walid Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, this is almost like, it's said like this, but that's not what it is. It's said this way, but that's not really what it is. What it is the first thing that's often mentioned. And you'll find numerous works of tafsir mention either one of these things. But nonetheless, we can understand what Mujiruddin's opinion was, based on what he mentioned first. All right, that we're talking about walid and wama. Walid means, and by Adam, and its offspring meaning all of mankind. So here, with this, I swear by, it's showing us a second place by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath. The first place being, لا أقسم بهذا البلد. I swear by this city. وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد. Then takes another oath by the begetter and the begotten. He says, لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد, which means we have created man في كبد, for toil and labor. And there's two ways we can understand this. First, and they don't really, these two ways, they don't oppose one another, so it can be all inclusive. The first is, and this is the answer, this is Jawab al-Qasam, by the way, we have created man. We have created man. And we've talked about this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using creation as an evidence for His divinity, His exclusive right to worship, to be worshipped. That He's the one that created you, and so He is the one that has the right to be worshipped by you. So here, Allah is swearing by this city, He's swearing by the begetter and the begotten. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. We have created man for toil and labor. And here when He says created man, He's referring to mankind in general. And for toil and labor, it means fatigue and difficulty, that man struggles with the troubles of this world and the hardships of the hereafter. Man struggles with the difficulties or the troubles of this world, and of course, the hardships of the hereafter. That's the nature of the kebed, the hardship. There's also لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, that they were created in hardship. Like they were created for hardship, and they were created in hardship. And this has to do with the nature of man's birth. That the mother, in her pregnancy, delivery, and breastfeeding and weaning goes through hardship. And this you can find in the Quran. Surat al-Ahqaf, this is chapter 46, verse number 15. حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ كُرْهًا وَوَضَعَتْهُ كُرْهًا وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ 30 شَهْرًا, which means their mothers bore them in hardship and delivered them in hardship. Their period of bearing and weaning is 30 months. So referring to breastfeeding and weaning the child from breast milk. So it's a series of difficult tasks in which mankind, both male and female, were born of and into. Meaning that you will continue to struggle throughout your life. So the oath here and its subject, which is creating man in hardship, should make it very plain to us that the desire to live a peaceful and comfortable life in this world without going through hardship is a false notion. Silly idea to think that you could live a peaceful, comfortable life in this world without any hardship. Yeah, you can have moments of peace. That's how it works, by the way. It doesn't have to always be hard and struggle and difficulty. And you shouldn't think that, well, when I'm in a moment of ease and joy and contentment that something's wrong, but you should also not feel that Allah has left me because I'm struggling. Allah is not with me because I'm facing hardship and difficulty. Allah has cursed me because things are hard right now. We have to understand the nature of what the tests and the trials are of this world, which can be a great blessing for you, a way to purify you, a way to strengthen and to grow your capacity as a person of faith while you endure those hardships. So it's just not possible to imagine a life without such difficulty. In fact, we could say it's necessary, it's required to have hardship and difficulty, to find some type of stress or go through some distress, some afflictions. These are going to befall every person. And so, because it is an absolute, a person with any type of wisdom or insight would be at the ready to work hard for something that may help them for an eternal life of peace and ease. And the only factor that will help them is their faith and obedience to Allah. Their faith in and obedience to Allah. And we're going to come back to that shortly. The next verse, it reads, أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّن يَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ أَحَدٌ, which basically means, does he think that none has power over him? أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّن يَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ أَحَدٌ. Does he think that none has power over him? Does he think that none has power over him because of his strength? And there's various different recitations to this. Abu Ja'far ibn Amr, Asim, and Hamza recited it, does he think, with a fatha on the sin, أَيَحْسَبُ, while others recited it with a kasra, أَيَحْسِبُ. أَيَحْسَبُ, أَيَحْسِبُ. Okay, so either one of these recitations you might find depending on the mode of recitation. It's narrated. So here, we have to get the context here. It says, does he think that none has power over him? It's narrated that this verse and those that follow, there's a couple of verses that follow here that are connected to each other, that they were revealed concerning a man named Abu al-Ashaddain. That's his kunya, Abu al-Ashaddain. His name was Asid ibn Khalda al-Jumahi. Okay, so he was noted to be very strong. He would challenge people in a contest of strength. He would place a leather shield, if you will, on the ground under his foot, and he would stand there challenging people to remove it, to pull it out from underneath him. And the only way they could get it out is if it ripped. Otherwise, no one could pull that thing from underneath his foot. So, a man of great physical strength. It's also said, it was reported, that he once mockingly said regarding the verse related to the 19 angels serving as the guardians of hell, that he would repel 10 of those angels with his right shoulder and 9 with his left shoulder, so that the disbelievers that were mocking at this, alayha tis'ata ashar, right? Upon the hell there are 19 guardians, those are the angels, that he was going to drive them back with his shoulders so that they could enter Jannah. He said that istihza'an, right? As a form of mockery. And if you understand al-istihza', you know that that is kufr. So it said that in this particular verse, أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّن يَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ أَحَدٌ, does he think that none has power over him because he has strength, was revealed regarding Abu al-Ashaddain, Asid ibn Khalda al-Jumahi. There are, however, others that say it was revealed about somebody else. However, this is what Mujiruddin favors. يَقُولُ أَهْلَكْتُ مَالًا لُبَدًا. The next verse says, he says, I have squandered wealth in abundance. He says, I have squandered wealth in abundance, meaning I have spent a lot of money in opposition to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, you can see, if we're talking about Abu al-Ashaddain, that he is already an enemy to the Prophet ﷺ, mocking at the religion and the revelation. And here is talking about spending wealth in opposition to the Prophet, against the messenger and his message. So, يَقُولُ أَهْلَكْتُ مَالًا لُبَدًا. Mujiruddin, as we know, part of his tafsir is talking about some of the nuances of the language and modes of recitation. So some of those you can find here. Abu Ja'far reads لُبَدًا. لُبَدًا with a single ba. And then there is lubbada with a shadda on it, which denotes two of the same letter. Lubbada. It's a stressed ba. And when you say lubbada, it's referring to the plural, like raki', rukka', sajid, sujjad. So this is a plural form of labid. And that means a large amount of money. Okay? As opposed to mal and lubada, which is the recitation that most of us are familiar with. It's that which I recited in the very beginning. And this indicates the same thing. They basically mean the same thing. A lot of money, one amount of wealth layered over the other. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating his claim that he spent a great deal of wealth in abundance. This, however, was not true. It was a brag and a boast. As Allah says, أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّمْ يَرَهُ أَحَدٌ. Does he think that no one sees him? So here what that means is, does he think that Allah the Almighty did not see it and does not know how much he spent? So he's basically bragging about something that he didn't actually do. He's saying he spent more money than he actually did. And if we're referring to Abu al-Shaddain, and this is according to Ibn Abbas, he said that he would brag about all of this money that he spent against the Prophet ﷺ. In reality, however, he did not spend the amount that he claimed. And so that's where Mujiruddin is getting this from a narration from Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma ijma'in. Again, pointing out some of the differences here in the recitation. أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّمْ يَرَهُ أَحَدٌ. Abu Ja'far and Yaqub read it, يَرَهُ أَحَدٌ. أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّمْ يَرَهُ أَحَدٌ. Shortened. There's a vowelized, the ha here is shortened with a dhamma. And of course, there's the elongated version, أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّمْ يَرَهُ أَحَدٌ. Right, so you have a different recitation there. So in the event that you hear one or the other, you don't have to rush to make a correction. It may be that there's motor recitations being deployed, utilized. So now we kind of change up the scene. So if we're talking about somebody specific here in these verses, we can get into something a bit more general in the following verses. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ. Did we not make for him eyes? So here Allah begins to recount the blessings that he has bestowed upon man as an argument against each and every one of us. So he's going to use the faculties that he's blessed us with. He says, did we not make for him eyes? Obviously eyes with which to see. وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ. And a tongue and two lips. Right? The tongue is used to speak, as Mujiruddin points out. And the lips are there. What do you think the lips are there for? He says, to close upon the tongue when they want to be quiet. So you have the tools to talk. And guess what? As it happens to be, you have not one lip, but two to be quiet. Okay? That should be an indicator. Right? Sometimes they say like, I have two ears to listen and one mouth to speak, which means I should be listening more and talking less. And I have one tongue to use to speak and two lips to be quiet with, which means I should be quiet more than I am speaking. And we talked about that in the past when it came to the topic of samt, which means to be reserved in the things that you say. So we have walisan and washafatain, a tongue to speak with and two lips to close upon his tongue while he wants to be silent. وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ. He says, and we have shown him the two ways. Meaning we've shown mankind the two ways. The two ways here are the paths to good and to evil. And this is the opinion of the majority. The majority of the scholars say, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ means that we have shown them the paths of both good and evil. Because there are others that say, النَّجْدَيْنِ refers to the breast of the mother, where the child's going to suckle. So what we can get from these short verses here about the eyes and the mouth and guidance, we should come to the conclusion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. Number one, we open with that. And that whoever denies the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should look into themselves first to see these signs, that they will observe within these things their sight and their ability to speak and their ability to understand guidance of what's right and wrong, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power and perfect wisdom. They can observe within themselves these two eyes, and they can observe with those two eyes the magnificence of Allah, the glory, the sublimity, the omnipotent presence, if you will. All of that can be observed with the two eyes. It's a command that we constantly get throughout the Quran, to go look, to go examine, to go ponder, to go reflect, to go look. And when you look or examine, because that's what it says, nadar. The word is nadar in Arabic, which is often translated as to go look. It also means to examine. With the two eyes, what did we begin with here? Alam naj'al lahu aynayn. Keep this in mind, the order. Alam naj'al lahu aynayn. Did we not make for him two eyes? Right, so go and employ those eyes to see the world around you, to see the ayat, the various different signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'll come to the conclusion that Allah is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Allah is the provider. He's the sustainer. He's the giver of life and of death. All right. And then when you've come to that conclusion by way of you seeing and witnessing all of that, what do you have? وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَةً. You have a lisan to what? Utter the shahada. Then you can proclaim your faith. Once you've done all that, you can confess with your tongue the truth of what you now have witnessed and believed. And then, after that, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ. Allah has shown you the two ways of good and evil, and has given you the ability to pick one or the other. And with your faith, you should choose the way of righteousness. You should. Doesn't mean you always do. And that gets us to the next point here. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَقُتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. He says, this is what it means, translated loosely, but he has not broken through the obstacle. We'll get into this a little bit. So here, but he has not broken through the obstacle, meaning that he has not taken the path that leads to salvation. And the obstacle here is usage, an Arabic usage of the word, kind of like a cultural usage of this particular word. And it's a metaphor for a difficult action. And that action revolves around spending wealth. This is a difficult task, to spend your wealth. Allah says, لن تنالوا البر ولن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. It says you will not achieve piety until you spend from that which you love. And to achieve piety is not an easy task. And the avenues to that are not easy tasks, like spending from your wealth. And we can understand that there are numerous hadith that talk about the nature of wealth, the nature of mankind when it comes to spending money, how shaitan will whisper to us to withhold and to refrain from spending that money, etc. So here, it's a very difficult action, as we can understand in the Arabic language, and it's likened to a steep mountain pass. Al-Aqaba is one of two things in the Arabic language. It's either a mountain, you go up on the mountain, or Aqaba is a valley, you go down. like Bay'atul Aqaba. All right, so there's a valley or a ravine. So it's either one. But here, Mujiruddin, he says, it's like a steep mountain pass, which is difficult to climb, and it's ascending in its height. And so breaking through that means entering with some level of difficulty. So the idea behind the metaphor here is that climbing a steep mountain, when you're fleeing to safety from an enemy to save your life, you either climb the mountain. If you think about Battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ, when they retreated, what did they do? They climbed up into Uhud. And they retreated and they were safe. Climbing up, it can save your life. Or, if we were to say the Aqaba here means to go into a valley, a person could retreat into a valley to hide from an oncoming enemy. They could hide down in the ravine. So either way, either climbing or descending, fleeing, could save your life. Just like righteous deeds can save you from hell. So Allah says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ, and what can make you know what the obstacle is? And this type of questioning we can find in the Quran in multiple verses. And when Allah introduces this type of questioning, what He is doing is magnifying the significance of the issue. So this obstacle is extremely significant due to the repetitive nature of it here. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ, or this question here. And what can make you know what the obstacle is? He says, فَكُّ رَقَبَةِ. Now this is the obstacle. The obstacle is the freeing of a slave. Raqaba is the neck, right? And that's what was referred to as having somebody's neck. Fakku raqaba, fak means to open up or to release. And so we're going to release a slave. So explaining this, breaking through the obstacle, is freeing a slave, emancipating them. And whoever frees a slave, it is his ransom from the fire. As Mujiruddin rahimahullah ta'ala mentions, that when you free a slave, you have ransomed yourself from hell. The Prophet ﷺ said this very thing: whoever frees a believing slave, Allah will free for every limb of the slave one of his limbs from the fire. This is to such an extent that He, Allah, will free a hand for a hand, a leg for a leg, and a private part for a private part. And this hadith you can find in Musnad Imam Ahmad. And there are many other hadith that indicate the same thing, a great reward for freeing slaves. And the companions, when they would hear these teachings, either from the Prophet ﷺ directly or from his companions, if they possessed bond servants, it was very typical of them to go and to free them, to emancipate them, once they heard the reward associated with it. That's the first part of the obstacle. The next part he says, "Oh, it'a'amun fi yawmin dhi masghaba." He says, or feeding on a day of severe hunger. Or feeding. So first you have the freeing, and then you have the feeding. And Mujiruddin, he mentions some various nuances here in recitation. So we have طعام في يوم ذي مسغبة. He says that Ibn Kathir and Abu Amr and Kisa'i, they said fakka fil kaf as opposed to fakku. They said fakka, and they said raqabatan. Fakka raqabatan, which means is a verb. Right? The first one is fakku raqabatin. This is mudafun ilay. If you are up to level number 5 in Arabic, book number 1, you will remember mudafun ilay. It's a structure in the Arabic language which means ownership or denotes ownership. Fakku raqabatin as opposed to fakka raqabatan. If you're not familiar with any of that, that's fine. I would suggest you take a basic Arabic class, and then these things would have some more meaning to you. You'd understand what the differences are in these recitations. And that leads to it'a'amun So they said, أطعم بفتح الحمزة والميم من غير تنوين ولا ألف قبلها. So this is both of them become past tense verbs. ففك رقبة, right? This is to free the slave. This is the عقبة. This is the obstacle. وأطعم, as well as feeding, is a part of the obstacle because إطعام, he says, or feeding. So it's either freeing a slave or feeding on a day of severe hunger. So that gives you an idea kind of what you might run into with various modes of recitation. The general idea behind those differences is that they really mean the same thing. The change in structure doesn't change the outcome of the meaning. It's either you're going to manumit a bondservant or you're going to free someone on a day of severe hunger. So the next verse he says, يَتِيمًا ذَا مَقْرَبَةٍ, which means to an orphan of near relationship. So an orphan that is a relative, if you will. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said that charity given to the poor person is counted as one charity, while if it is given to a relative is counted as two. Charity given to a poor person, unrelated, is one reward. Charity given to a poor person that is related is two. Why do you think it's two? Why? Why does it count as two good deeds? There's two deeds here wrapped in one action. Does anyone know? It's an order of Allah. Okay? We want to do silatu ar-rahim, which is to join family ties. Right? Joining family ties is the big thing in our religion. Okay, so when you give charity is a big thing in our religion. So when you give charity, you get a good deed. And when you've given charity to a relative of sorts, then you've done two things, the charity and the silatul rahim, which is the joining of the family ties. And so here he says, yatiman dha maqraba. Maqraba is from the word qaruba, which is qurba, which is qareeb. Qareeb means a relative. Maqraba, if you hear the word, there's qaf, ra, ba, maqraba. There's a relationship that's there between you and, you recognize qareeb, you know that word, and maqraba, they have the same sound to them. So again, that's the Arabic coming in. That's where you can feel some richness happening. Qareeb. And that's even how you say a relative, by the way, in Arabic. You say, hada qareebun li. This is a relative of mine. Okay? A relative of mine. So here we're talking about the relationship that's there. O miskinan dha matrabah. O miskinan. We know what miskin means, a needy person. Dha matrabah has been translated to be like in misery. So you're going to feed or give charity to an orphan of a near relationship. That's number one. Note here that this is in order. These are in order right now in terms of what's preferred, right? What do we begin with? Fakku raqabah. And then we begin with giving of food, a charity to an orphan that's a close relationship. O miskinan dha matraba, or someone that is poor and that is destitute. So the dha matraba, according to Ibn Abbas, is someone who is dejected in the street. They have no house, no home, or anything to protect them against the turba, the turab. You know the word turab? What's that? They called Ali Abu Turab, the Prophet ﷺ, father of the dust or the dirt. So when he says, oh miskinan dha matraba, you can hear the same matraba, the ta, ra, ba, you can hear that in there, meaning the miskin that is dusty. That's how you would literally say it, the miskin that's dusty. But what that means is they're dusty because they have no clean place to be, they have no home to protect themselves against living out in the dirt. So here you can see these obstacles, these challenging obstacles that you have to break through. Right? You have to do something serious to save yourself. There's serious action involved, like climbing that hill, fleeing from the enemy. Embarking upon such deeds is how you save yourself from hell. says, ثُمَّ كَانَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Then he is of those who believe. Mujiruddin points out here, he says, then he is, ثُمَّ كَانَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Then he is, we're talking about the person here is going to break through the obstacle, meaning at the time of breaking through the obstacle, at that time, he was of those who believe. مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. At the time of doing that list of things, he was of those who believed. It's not that the person did those things and then they become a believer later on, because doing those acts of piety, they don't benefit a person without iman. You have to have the requisite iman for your actions to be of benefit for you. So that means when you're doing them, it's not like I got to go do something and then I find faith. It's you're doing them because you have faith. And the obstacle here otherwise would not be of any benefit for a non-believer if there wasn't the iman there. ثُمَّ كَانَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And we can find similar, this theme repeated in the Quran. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. And another verse Allah says, what means, and whoever desires the hereafter and strives for it with the necessary effort, do for it while he is a believer. Notice here he says, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. That they want the hereafter and then they begin to work for the hereafter. وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. While they're a believer, فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. It's those whose striving will be rewarded. مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا مِنْ ذَكَرٍ وَأُنْثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. Another verse. Whoever works righteousness, be they male or female, while being a believer. وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. Meaning, at the time of being a person of faith, that's when the deeds will be of any avail. And then he says, in the following, I should say in the remainder of the verse, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبَرِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْمَرْحَمَةِ, which means that they enjoin one another to patience and enjoin one another to compassion. Meaning they advise one another to patience. And what that is talking about specifically, when we're talking about ثُمَّ كَانَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, they were a person at the time of faith, that they're going to advise each other to be patient with faith, not to give up on faith, through the struggles that they might be going through that we hinted at before, through the difficulty of the deeds that you're trying to pursue, that you have to be patient in doing that. You can't get in there and be overwhelmed and then quit. And there's some pro tips you'll find in the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, خَيْرُ أَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلْ. The most beloved or the best, most rewarded deeds to Allah are those that are أَدْوَمُهَا, the consistent ones, even if they be few. So as to not overwhelm yourself. And then to recognize that there are seasons of spiritual endeavor, right? Like Ramadan. You know, often we get to the end of Ramadan and go, why can't we have Ramadan all year? Because you're not meant to have Ramadan all year. Because you would probably, you wouldn't go the distance. Allah gives us that. To have those seasons. Like Hajj. You're not going to do Hajj all year, etc. Like there's a time for this, and there's a time for that. So we have to recognize those things so as to not give up. We have to be patient and consistent with our iman. And of course, that also includes being patient away from sin. Right? That's also a type of patience, that when you're presented with sin, that you can withstand the temptation, that you can refrain and abstain. That's a level of patience and endurance that's required for a person of faith. And so that's what here is so important. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, meaning they advise one another. Okay? Islam is a communal project. Okay? It's a communal effort. And when you live in a society like ours, which is very individualistic, we often get offended when you try and participate in our religious life. I don't need advice. Who are you telling me what to do? I don't need your help. When the reality is, that's probably exactly what you need. We all need that. And to be around that company is what's going to help you go the distance. And that I have found to be true, not only in myself, but in so many others, having to deal with the job that I do with counseling and consultation of a religious nature. It's a lot of that. I'm around these type of people, and so I end up doing these types of things. What am I supposed to do? Well, you got to get away from those people and around people that are going to get you to do the other things, because وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْمَرْحَمَةِ, because they advise and they counsel one another in a communal manner, one helping the other, right? One helping the other. And of course, there are manners and protocols to how you go about advising people and helping them out in a brotherly or sisterly fashion. So this is the first thing, that they advise each other in terms of their patience with their iman, and to stay away from sins. And of course, they advise each other with compassion or showing mercy to mankind. The Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, "La yarhamullahu man la yarhamin nas," that Allah doesn't show rahmah wa alaykum salam rahmatullah, to those who do not show mercy to mankind. Allah does not show rahmah to those who do not show mercy to mankind. Another narration of the Prophet, another hadith, "Man lam yarham saghirana wa ya'rif haqqa kabirina falaysa minna." Whoever does not show mercy to our children, our young, nor does he or she recognize the right of our elders, then they're not from us. Again, highlighting the issue of mercy. And when you are of those people, أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ, he says they are the companions of the right. They are described with these qualities. They have faith. They advise each other with patience and with compassion and mercy. And they will be the people of the right, meaning the right side. And we understand when it comes to the delivering of the records, those that have them on the right will be successful, while those that have them on the left will perish. He says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا هُمْ أَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ. But those who disbelieve in our signs are the companions of the left. So we get to see both sides. The left side here, the side of hell. عَلَيْهِمْ نَارٌ مُؤْصَدَةٌ. He says, upon them is a fire closed in. Alayhim, again, if you're taking Arabic class, you'll note that. It's a very simple construction. Ala, and then you have hum, so alayhim, meaning upon them. Narun, you know that is the word for fire. Mu'sada, this might be a new word if you're not more advanced. Mu'sada here, it's basically something that's closed over a person. It's like when you close the door. That's where it comes from, by the way. It's reported, various recitations, Abu Amr, Yaqub, Hamza, Khalaf, Hafs. From Asim, they recited it with a Hamza, Mu'sada. Mu'sada comes from the word Asadtul Bab. Asadtul Bab means I closed the door. And the rest, they recited it with a waw, without the Hamza, Mu'sada. And that comes from the word Al-Sadtu. Al-Sadtu. And they both mean the same thing. It's just a different word form. And so when you get to this particular construction of the word, it has a different shape to it. Mu'sada and Mu'sada. Okay? So it means to close over or to close behind. Ibn Abbas said its doors will be closed. Dhahak, he said Mu'sada, it will be sealed over them and it will have no door once closed. Qadada, he said that Mu'sada means that it will be shut and there will be no light in it, no crevice, no way to get out, and there will be no escape forever. And that concludes the tafsir of Surat al-Balad. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakallah khair.